gathered from all corners.
Chabad Lubavitch is an ultra-Orthodox Jewish sect with more than 10,000 emissaries in 100 countries worldwide. There are 52 centers in Ukraine and around 150 emissaries. Chabad is a dominant force in the Jewish community in Ukraine. Dnipro, Ukraine is the home to the largest Chabad, indeed the largest Jewish center in the world. Its benefactor was Ukrainian oligarch Igor Kolomoisky. But what is Chabad Lubavitch? Founded in the small Russian town of Lyubaveki near the border with Belarus, it is a messianic sect which believes Jews are the chosen people. According to Haaretz, Chabad's key religious texts state that non-Jews have only animal souls, not human souls. It runs a children's group called the Army of Hashem, which in the words of the leader of the sect, the Rebbe who died in 1994, is dedicated to waging war against non-Judaism. The supremacism of Chabad is nowhere more evident and pointed than in its activities in Palestine. A book called The King's Torah, written by two Chabadi rabbis from the notorious Yitzhar illegal settlement, justifies the killing of Palestinian children. It's not just words either. Chabad Lubavitch is heavily involved in the furthest extremes of the settler movement in Palestine. Chabad Lubavitch opposes returning any land at all to Palestinians, and according to the Zionist intelligence agency Shin Bet, almost all price tag revenge attacks on Palestinians are carried out by followers of the sect. Chabad has links with the movement of the extremist Rabbi Meir Kahan, whose organization, the Jewish Defense League, was designated as a terrorist organization by the FBI. Chabad was reportedly implicated in funneling money from the US to Israel for Kahane. Today, it is deeply implicated in alleged fraud and embezzlement by Ukrainian oligarch Igor Kolomoisky. The Department of Justice has filed 4 separate actions against Kolomoisky, who is banned from entering the US. 2 Chabad leaders are specifically named in the charges. Given this history, it's no surprise that Chabad Lubavitch is integral to the events in Ukraine and is aligned with the far-right Ukrainian nationalists.
Well, that's another illuminating video, David. What can you tell us about this mysterious Chabad Lubavitch sect, and what's its role in the Zionist movement?
It performs a very interesting role. They have this thing called shluchim, which is a word for emissaries, and they send emissaries all around the world. They have 10,000 of them, they say, in 100 countries. And the role of the shluchim is to encourage people to return to Jewish religious practice and to return to certain forms of Orthodox practice. And it's used as a way of bringing people into to Zionism by encouraging religious observance, even for non-Orthodox Jews. In a way, it's a funny thing, because they don't really regard Reform and liberal and progressive Jews as being real Jews, and it's an extraordinary sort of thing. But it's used to proselytize for the Zionist movement as well as for Orthodox Judaism, and it's of course leaned on by the Zionist movement more properly known. The Jewish Agency, for example, has adopted the same term, shluchim, for its emissaries, and it sends emissaries from Israel all across Britain and all across many other Western countries. And so it's used as a kind of cutting edge for expanding the influence of Zionism, even although it appears simply to be a religious organization.
Interesting. I mean, even the infamous Zionist intelligence agency Shin Bet seems skeptical about Chabad Lubavitch. I mean, why do you think its role in revenge attacks on Palestinians isn't better known? I mean, people need to be aware about this.
It's a truly extraordinary story, isn't it? These are people who are involved in daily attacks and humiliations of Palestinians. It's well known in Palestine that this is the case. The Zionist press regularly talks about it, and many of the things in the report you've just seen, the quotes come from Zionist press articles. But outside of Palestine, it's regarded as being a sort of cuddly and interesting Jewish local organization which will bring you in for a Shabbat supper and will be nice to the local Jews and indeed to non-Jews. But actually, you know, when you look a little bit deeper, the theology underlying this, you saw that in the clip just there, the idea of a war against non-Judaism. It's a little bit frightening when people begin to think of that, how that might relate to the attacks on Palestinians, but also how that might relate to the views of this organization in terms of people in this country. So it's extremely surprising, really, when you see this, that hardly anybody in this country has any idea that this is the kind of organization it is.
Well, hopefully what we're doing today will have illuminated a few more people. But look, I mean, the FBI's banned the Ukrainian oligarch Kolomoisky and his family from the US and named 2 senior Chabad leaders as being intimately involved in his alleged looting and fraud in the United States. But how does that relate, do you think, to the conflict in Ukraine?
Well, the money, over $5 billion, it's said, was looted by Kolomoisky from a bank. This is only from the bank we're talking about. And it was done by a network of shell companies, which President Zelensky also benefited from. But these 2 guys, the Chabad guys in Florida, who've taken millions and millions of dollars, spread it around real estate and spread it around Chabadi charities in New York and indeed in Florida. This has been a means to get the money out of Ukraine. So it's been a means which has contributed to the destabilization of Ukraine. So that's one way in which it has contributed. But it's also contributed in the sense that Kolomoisky is absolutely central to the encouragement of the neo-Nazis and the pursuit of the power of President Zelensky. So there's a very strong connection here between the Chabad movement, which of course is supported in the Ukraine by Kolomoisky, and the whole neo-Nazi question. So these are very closely connected and you know, truly extraordinary as a picture of what's happening in Ukraine now.
Absolutely. I mean, Lowkey, I wonder whether you could sum up for us how you think this Kolomoisky network relates to NATO's activities in Ukraine.
Well, essentially, since 2008, at least, at the Bucharest summit, you had NATO put very clearly in their conclusions that Ukraine would join the alliance. This is black and white and available on the NATO website. When you look at this funneling of money into building up what would become the bulwark of the Ukrainian state against Russia, then you see quite clearly how Kolomoisky and NATO's interests have intertwined. It's also important to point out that historically it's been said that if we were to list every single former Nazi that worked with NATO, that was sort of subsumed into NATO following World War II, it would take something like 3,000 pages. For example, you look at Sidney Gottlieb and his innovative work in terms of torture and developing MK Ultra. It took place with a team of Nazi doctors and scientists. There's so many other examples of the way in which US policy has integrated into it Nazi figures. So really, this is not a historical aberration at all.